Today's topic is a locomotive from the Caledonia Works range, specifically one that I've had in my collection for a fair while now. The more comprehensive packs, such as the London and North Eastern Railway D20 and J27 classes, are still decent in their own right, but the sheer amount of different variants in those sorts of packs can be difficult for me to fully wrap my head around, so today I wanted to focus on a simpler add-on. The London and North Western Railway A class was released as a TS Classic add-on in June 2020, and 5 years later, she is still available from CW's website for £13, or the better part of $30 at full price. It's worth noting that £13 was the price at launch, and it hasn't gone up after all this time. For the longest time, the only LNWR engines from CW's range that I had in my collection was this trio comprising 3020 Cornwall, the Greater Britain 2222, and the A-Class 080. More recently, I've ended up with more LNWR engines in my collection. The engines in question are the Coal Tank 062, 18-inch Goods 060, Clawton 460, and 380 Class 084. I've already made a video about the big 084 tank engine, but at present, I'm not sure if I'll do the same for the other three. On the topic of the LNWR, I'd be interested in seeing the DX Goods Class 060 and Improved Precedent Class 240 in TS at some point, be they from CW or another developer. And now for a brief history on the A-Class, an engine designed by Francis Webb for heavy freight trains, complete with a 3-cylinder compound arrangement, with one low-pressure cylinder inside the frames and 2 high-pressure cylinders outside. 111 examples of the class were built at Crew Works between 1894 and 1900, and they went on to haul all sorts of different freight trains throughout the LNWR network. However, these engines proved problematic and overly complicated, so Francis Webb's successor, George Whale, set about rebuilding them. Initially, 15 examples became the 2-cylinder C-Class between 1904 and 1906, but they retained their original boilers. These proved inadequate for the new 19.5-inch bore cylinders, so the next 62 members of the A-Class were rebuilt with larger diameter boilers between 1906 and 1909, becoming the D-Class in the process. The remaining 34 A's were rebuilt under Charles Bowen Cook's direction between 1909 and 1912, becoming the C1 class, which differed from the C-Class by way of cylinders with a slightly smaller diameter. The Cs and C1s had all been withdrawn and scrapped by 1933, but the Ds kept going for much longer as they were rebuilt again between 1925 and 1931, now becoming part of the superheater-equipped G1 class, otherwise known as the Super D, alongside 170 locomotives built as G1s from new. 327 G1s would later be rebuilt yet again as the G2A class. Then the rather complicated evolution of LNWR 080s ended with the G2 class of 1921, of which 60 examples were built. Just like the G1, the G2 and G2A classes were also nicknamed Super D. The G1, G2 and G2A classes survived well into the British Railways era, with the final examples withdrawn in 1964. While no examples of the A-Class are preserved in either original or rebuilt condition, one of the later generation LNWR 080s was more fortunate. The locomotive in question is G2 class number 485, or, to use her British Railways number, 49395. Besides the A-Class locomotive herself, the add-on from CW also includes a decent selection of LNWR freight wagons and a brake van, not to mention a quick drive consist using said rolling stock. Normally, I would list off all the liveries included with an add-on, but the A-Class only includes one livery, namely LNWR Blackberry Black, as that's all that these locomotives ever wore in their original condition prior to rebuilding. Just thinking back to the rolling stock for a moment, I particularly like this wagon that's got a 1911 Baker electric car on it. It'd be interesting to see this thing alongside a Tesla Model S. According to the manual, the A-Class was the first CW product for which Mr. Wilson used a program called a Substance Painter. The engine has high-resolution textures, but doesn't really impact PC performance too much, at least on my end. Of course, performance mode is still included for people with less powerful computers. It's toggled with Shift-P, and switches off shadows and point lights. While looking around the footplate, I noticed a few interesting details in particular, such as a Bible sitting at the fireman's position, the unusual location of the train brake lever, the rounded firebox door that opens into the firebox, and the almost complete lack of weather protection for the crew, although that sort of thing was common back in the day, especially where the Great Western Railway's locomotives were concerned. As for other features on the A-Class, these are the numerous cab camera views, period-accurate LNWR lamps, a customizable lamp arrangement on both the locomotive and tender, a fully detailed cab, 3D firebox and coal, animated valve gear inside the frames, although I'm not sure what specific type of valve gear this is, animated brake rigging, which is best viewed right up close, dynamic smoke particles, working water scoop, which is lowered with T and raised with Shift T, advanced safety valves, although these have a habit of blowing off for a very long period of time, and fire intensity synchronized with the exhaust beat. This last one caught me by surprise because, for the longest time, I thought it was one of the newer features introduced with Locomotion 2.0. For reference, this locomotive uses the older Locomotion 1.3 scripting. Much like the Greater Britain Class 2222, which I reviewed earlier in 2025, the A-Class has an unusual exhaust beat of only 2 chuffs per wheel rotation. This is due to the exhaust from the 2 outside high-pressure cylinders being funneled into the single inside low-pressure cylinder, with the end result being a locomotive that sounds like she's travelling half as fast as she actually is. Even though the A's were freight engines, I sometimes like to run them with the LNWR coaches that Matrix Trains modelled, partly because that means I can get more use out of these coaches. When you're driving the A-Class, it's worth remembering that the ideal fire mass is between 800 and 900 pounds, or 55 to 62% if you're using the F4 heads-up display, and the water level should be kept between 70 and 90%. During a test run for this video, I found that this locomotive could only reach a top speed of 39 miles per hour. If that's realistic, so be it. The manual provides instructions on keyboard controls and how to drive this locomotive, which can be useful if you're new to driving steam locomotives in TS Classic. I've always liked running LNWR locomotives on the Esthwaite Branch, partly because the route makes use of various LNWR style assets modelled by Chaddock Engineering. Another route that could be suitable for these locomotives is the Stainmore, Shap and Eden Valley route from Steam's Sound Supreme, although I still haven't got Stainmore myself. Thinking back to the Esthwaite Branch, this route and the A-Class featured in flashback scenes for one of my Thomas stories, with the locomotive representing an old friend I remembered from high school. For a deeper reason that I don't feel comfortable discussing, the story is named Over My Head after my favourite song from Toni Basil. Famous locomotives like the LNWR A4 Pacific and GWR City class are all well and good, but at the same time, it's nice to see less well-known locomotives like the LNWR A class represented in TS as well. I like this 080 tender engine primarily for her interesting design, whose long boiler reminds me of the North Eastern Railway 1001 class, as bizarre of a comparison as that may be. Because of my preference for faster engines, and I'm often busy with other video projects, I don't use the A class all that often myself, but if you like running heavy freight trains with British steamers in TS, then this engine is worth a try. As for ratings, I think she deserves a 7.5 out of 10, and if you've stuck around to the end of the video, you win tickets to see a band made up of LBSCR steam locomotives and men who worked underground in Cornwall. It's the Bill and Tin Miners,